Welcome to episode 47, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction and build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. Why suffer when you can learn? And all of us want to learn more from those people who've already been out there and done it and are making it happen. And our guest today is certainly one of those people. I have worked with Stuart Seiden on several projects, and he is one of those people that I think is just a really natural, great leader. And so he is currently principal at Avila and Seiden Architects. And prior to that, for about 17 years, he was capital projects manager at the County of Fresno. So I think it's wonderful to see what happens maybe at a county level on how you can approach your projects differently to improve how you deliver them. So I welcome you, Stuart, to Construction Dream Team.
Well, thank you, Sue. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit. I know, but you've had a journey over several decades of working on different projects in different places. Tell us a little about your journey.
Well, I'd say my journey with collaboration sort of began when I was about 4 years old with the birth of my brother. My brother was developmentally disabled, and he learned differently, and he learned slower than others. And really, it was my parents sort of figuring out how to teach him that really sort of became the first bit of collaboration that we did. And then from there, as a student at Cal Poly, we had to take an Architecture 101 class, and everyone took this class. And so it provided, an overview of all the disciplines within the architecture environment. And so, they had an introduction of all the clubs there, and that's where I became aware of the Construction Specifications Institute. And I liked it, and I joined it because it included all the disciplines within the construction industry. It wasn't just architects, it wasn't just engineers or planners. And so that really intrigued me. So because none of the disciplines knows everything about all aspects of the industry. Probably the next piece in terms of collaboration was when my wife and I, Mary Alice Avila, got married. And so we're from diverse backgrounds and religions, and we kind of put that together and made several commitments to each other about that, and kind of designed our marriage ceremony around that. So, and it's stayed with us throughout, almost 43 years now. So, and as we begin our careers after college and everything, there are lots of different roads that we take, and hills and valleys and bumps and everything. And I don't think we ever envision where we're going to be that truly happens. So I began my career working at the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant just outside of Avila Beach, and that introduced me to process piping and large power plant construction, and sort of gave me a foundation for understanding central plants that I had to deal with, both at, when I worked for a school district and then working for Fresno County, because we had several of those. And then I moved on after that to work for a couple of communications engineering firms. And we were designing buried cable and underground conduit projects. And so what that did is, it informed me, and at least gave me a vocabulary of what the telephone company, Pacific Bell at that time, their vocabulary and how they do things. And so it gave me the background for when I had to move a 911 system for a client, and because neither the city nor the police department understood what they needed and what they wanted. And so so I was able to talk with both of them and interpret for them. So we did that. Moved to Visalia after that, and worked in architecture for about 4 years, and for different firms. A lot of them were innovative, and then for a real estate developer. So working for previously working around Pacific Bell, I had to do right-of-way searches and figure out where underground utilities. And one of the jobs that I got was because they were starting to do a master plan for a large existing hospital. And they had no idea where the utilities were. I said, well, hey, I can do that. That's a piece of cake. And so I did that and did some other hospital work and government buildings and shopping centers. And just, it was really exciting times until the economy died and I got laid off. So that really gave the genesis for Avalon Seiden to begin. And so Mary Alice had gotten her architect's license at that time, and we did that for about 15 years with a focus on non-residential work. I always thought that I was really sensitive to the owner's needs and making a durable building and everything, but it really wasn't until I went to work for the school district, that I found out how naive I was about that sort of stuff. And, the maintenance, I was working in maintenance and facilities for the school district. And the maintenance staff, never hesitated to come over and tell me, and even take me on a walk. They'd say, hey, come take a walk with us. And then we'd get to wherever they wanted to show me. And they say, okay, you see that there? Never do it again. Because all it does is it causes problems and it makes us have to go back and do work. And then we can't do, the maintenance work that we really should be doing. So through that, we developed basically architectural standards, design standards, and design guidelines for the school district to do things that the way that they wanted them done, and to reduce the amount of maintenance that the school district would have to do, so then they could do what needs to be done, because it was cutting into their budget significantly. And they had done a lot of studying of that before I got there. So then, after being at the school district for a few years, then I went over to Fresno County, where I was their capital projects manager for a little over 16 years. So we were basically the in-house architecture and development team for the county. So we did, a lot of projects from conception to move in. And I really say that a job like that, it gives you about 5 years of experience for every year that you spend there, because you're just working on such a variety of jobs and so many different things. And so all sorts of building types and everything. But one of the things that I did was I instituted a partnering program on all of our projects. And it was formal on larger projects and informal on smaller projects. So that's kind of what we did.
It's so interesting to just hear your journey, because for those of you who are newer to the industry or thinking about coming into the industry, you can see how every place you go, there's a new opportunity, and that opportunity opens a new door to another opportunity that opens another door to another opportunity.
It certainly does, yes.
And so construction is sort of like a building. You'll build it one step at a time. I mean, your career will be all sorts of things. There's so many avenues to go into, and there's so many things to do, and so many interesting projects that you can work on, that there's sort of an endless array, and it's very exciting. And I know that you've had many, many very successful projects, and they got bigger and broader, but look at all the background you had that allowed you to make them successful.
Yeah,
and so for those of you who are paying your dues now, that's what you do.
Yes,
and
that's right.
And that will open up doors in other ways, in other avenues.
And you never know what's going to be behind that door, but it's always something interesting.
Yes. Isn't that fun? That's what I love about construction. So I understand that on your last big program that you've been working on at Fresno, you used a unique selection process for that. And can you give us a little bit of an overview of this collaborative approach that you took for your selection?
Sure. It actually kind of changed in two different steps, mainly because we weren't getting the information that we thought we should be getting from the interview process for consultants. And so the first changes that we made, we began changing the format of the interviews. We said, we told them no electronic presentations. because everyone was doing PowerPoint presentations. But it took them, a fair amount of time to set up as well as to take down, and it was adding about a half hour or so to our interviews. And, for sometimes we were there before 8 o'clock and we finished after 5 o'clock with the team. And so we said, we need to make this streamline it a little bit. So we said, no electronic presentations. And then we also had the teams. We said, we want the person who we're going to deal with day to day there to lead the presentation. There can be other people there to back them up and everything. That's not a problem. But we wanted to hear from the person who we're going to deal with all the time. And we banned the marketing team from participating in the interview other than observers, because they really weren't the people that we were going to be dealing with. They were only there to sell the firm. So things improved a little bit, but not a lot. Then I was at an International Partnering Institute meeting, and I was sitting down talking with Ivar and Jeff of SFO about how they do their interview process. And so they kind of gave me told me a little bit about it, and then they shared some information with me about it, and I kind of tweaked the format and the questions and stuff to make them realistic to us. So that then became the second change, which was to have about 3 problem-solving sessions that lasted about 20 minutes each, that were led by the consultants, led by the consultants' day-to-day contact for us. And so the problems consisted of, solving a difficult problem where there were no easy answers, or exploring the depth and breadth of the experience of the team, and exploring how well the team communicates and shares information among themselves, and exploring the knowledge of the building type or service provided. So we were getting better information about the teams and how they worked, and it easily revealed the most qualified and collaborative teams to hire. So that was a real benefit.
So what was the evaluation process? So you had a scenario and people went through a scenario. How did you observe it? And, were they in front of you? How did you observe it? How did you evaluate it?
They were doing their deliberations in front of us. So we could listen to who was participating, and we could see who was not participating. We could listen to what they said. We could tell if, information was being communicated directly back to the person leading the interview. And this all really told us a lot about the team. And we could also find out who had the knowledge and who didn't have the knowledge about it. And if the team, even if that the individuals that we're going to be working with day to day, even if they didn't have the knowledge, the depth of knowledge that we needed, but someone else on their team did, that they knew how to go back to that individual and gather that information. And I'll tell you, most of the teams that we interviewed did not have that ability to do that.
So do you think that you would not have been able to achieve this if you hadn't done your number one change, which was you were actually interviewing the people who you were actually going to work with and not the marketing team?
Right.
So that was, and probably there's no PowerPoint involved in the scenarios.
No, not at all.
And how was this really different from your typical process?
Well, the typical process was they would come in and they would essentially regurgitate what they had provided in their proposal. So, they'd show us the pictures of, projects that they had done. They told us about their qualifications and told us what nice people they were, which they were. But it really wasn't telling us, and showing us who was the best firm to do the project, and who had really the ability to use their creative knowledge as well as the knowledge of the type. And the teams that we got really were creative, and we came up with some phenomenal solutions to the problems that we had. They turned out to be real listeners to our clients' needs and wants. So I think I think it made a big difference.
So when you were looking at the scenarios and you had the various teams, did you have an evaluation criteria, like a weighting, or were you looking for something specific?
We did have, evaluation criteria where we weighted the teams for the different on the scenarios and on the questions. We had opportunities to ask questions also, as did the team. So.
And did they also still give you basically an overview before they did the scenarios? Were there more parts to it than the scenario?
There were more parts to it to the scenario, but really the introduction that they had, it was maybe 5 minutes, and then they had 15 minutes to wrap it up. So it really wasn't a lot of time because we'd all read the proposals. We knew about the team, and so we're looking for more in-depth information and how they work, what their creative process was, and and how they work and communicate amongst themselves. So I mean, we had some that had actually most everyone associated with local firms, and some of the local firms weren't even participating. I mean, they were there, but they weren't even participating in stuff. And so that was very telling to us that they really didn't have much of a role in the project.
Got it. Yeah. So what would you say was your result from using this process versus your other process? What did you end up with?
Well, it was easier to determine the knowledge base of the teams. That was one of the things. We were able to see their level of communication, how well they communicated, not only within their own organization, but within their subcontractor organizations, and how they were kind of linking themselves together and doing that. Some teams said that they had worked together before, and sometimes it was obvious that yes, these people had worked together before, and other times it was obvious that no, they had never met each other until just getting there that morning. And so there wasn't any sort of chemistry between them. We saw their creative problem-solving skills and how they responded to the functional desires of our clients. We were able to ask them to have a scenario where they had to deliver bad news to us, because a lot of architects don't like to deliver bad news. And so we sort of pushed that on them. So it was very revealing in terms of how they would work with us.
So do you think you ended up selecting a different team than you would have otherwise?
Probably. Yeah, most likely, yes. Yeah.
And so as this team that was selected has now gone out and started designing and building, what has happened? What have you seen? Does this meet your objective for creating better teams, selecting better teams?
It's actually been a higher performing team. So it's, everyone's been working together, everyone's been communicating together. The clients are happier with the solutions that they've received, because in one case we got solutions that we never dreamed of. In terms of
in a good way.
In a good way, yeah. We got solutions that work better and that were more flexible, because depending on who the users were, or who the occupants were, because they changed from time to time, they got a much better solution. So it was really good. Really.
So it sounds like it really made a big difference.
Yes, it did.
So what advice would you offer to other owners who would want to use the scenario approach?
The problem solving has to be difficult enough to obtain meaningful dialogue, but yet simple enough to come up with a solution in a reasonable amount of time. I mean, you have to get it so that you can get what you need within the time allotted. And sometimes that time, only having so much time, kind of pushes the envelope in terms of them being able to come up with a solution. So, rather than thinking it over a lot. There have to be objectives in terms of what results are that you hope to obtain for each problem too. because the objectives may determine how the problem is structured and how the variables, are arranged in it. So, it just all depends.
Yeah, it seems to me that in this kind of approach, it can be quite creative, but it also is going to be around the owner really knowing what they want, because then your scenarios are going to be based on what you're looking for, and your criteria will be based on you're looking for something, whether it's collaboration or teamwork, or how do they, or how do they deal with their subs, some of the things that you had mentioned. But it could be you have other criteria that you're looking for. And so your scenario needs to make sure that it is appropriate for whatever it is you want to evaluate them on.
Yeah, and usually our goals were performance goals in terms of how the building worked, as opposed to a physical, a physical goal that we want something be, right next to one, something else, and then something else adjacent to it. So it was really being able to interpret those performance criteria and then come up with a physical solution.
Cool. Sounds very exciting. I know that you've been pretty involved in the Construction Specification Institutes back since college. So, you kind of have a different perspective, I think, because you see it nationally. Or do you see any trends in spec writing that maybe Construction Nation should be aware of or would be interested in?
I think most architects really, and this has been going on for years and years and years, that most architects aren't involved or don't care about the technical aspects as much as maybe they do the aesthetics of a project. At the county, we were really focused on functionality as well as life cycle, because we're planning on a building for 50 years. So that doesn't always happen from most architects, which results in higher maintenance costs to the owner. And a specifications writer can sort of help bridge those things and improve them for the architect, and oftentimes they do. Whether they're employed by the firm or if they're an independent spec writer that works for many firms. However, sometimes, the specifications writer will submit questions or ask for information, but it doesn't come until the project's ready to go out on the street. And so by then it's almost too late. And so it results in higher costs to the owners, or more change orders, or more maintenance costs. So I think as the building industry moves more towards composite materials and things, I said things are going to get more complex and more technically complex, and particularly from a structural and materials compatibility perspective. So I see that there's going to be a bigger need for specification writers, competent specification writers, and they're going to become more valuable as the materials become more complex too.
That's interesting. So what advice do you have for people on how do we embrace our specs writers in an appropriate way?
Rely on them, keep them, get them involved early on in the project, so that they can provide advice in a timely manner, because it's going to make all the difference in your projects.
So it sounds to me it's almost like a different role than I see an awful lot of times. An awful lot of times I think people think up what they want and then they ask the spec writers to more or less put that into some kind of verbiage, as opposed to the spec writers being the technical experts. And so perhaps we need to think of them more as a technical expert and get their input.
Well, yeah, they should be, a continuing member of the team. So, I mean, certainly there are certain aspects that they don't need to be in on all the decision making, but then there are other pieces where they really should be.
Cool. So I know that in your career, your journey, not everything's always gone perfectly as you'd hoped. Take us back to a challenge that you really faced, and what was the very worst moment of this, and what did you do, and what did you learn?
I would say probably the worst moment was on the project that we moved the 911 system. It had absolutely nothing to do with the 911 system because that went smoothly. But we're doing a renovation of two buildings for a small city. It was a city hall and police department. And I knew several of the subcontractors on the job because I often called subcontractors who I thought were good technicians and let them know of our projects, and they were always interested in bidding the projects that I did. So some of them began to inquire about, when a payment application was going to be approved on a project because they hadn't been paid. And so I said, I told them, I said, oh gosh, I've, approved payment applications. And in fact, in your line item, and I told them the exact dollar amount that I had approved for payment. So they said, well, they had not been paid. So ultimately I had to write a letter to the contractor telling them no, that they weren't going to get any more payments until their subs were paid, and they had to get an unconditional lien release from all the subcontractors showing that they had been paid. So the contractor did that for the most part, and they submitted the paperwork to me with the unconditional releases, and I spot checked them to see, that they had really signed them, and to even ask them if they had gotten paid. Now, an unconditional lien release means that they've received payment and they give up all claims on being able to litigate for those funds. So, and every one of them that had signed that had not received any funds at all. So I said, and I asked some of them, I said, so why did you do that? She says, well, we were just afraid we weren't going to get any, no more payments were going to be processed. So we signed it. I said, okay, that's, it's your business. So ultimately I had to, wrote a letter and one of the subcontractors, the release looked, something just didn't look right about it. So I called the subcontractor that it was from, and he said, oh, I never signed a release. I said, oh? I said, you sure? He goes, oh, yeah. I said, so I sent him a copy of it. And I said, is this your signature on it? And he says, that's not even my signature. So then I had to, write another letter, and somehow word got back to the primary partner in that construction company, and he contacted me, and he made everything right. Paid all the subcontractors everything that they were due, and tossed the other guy, his partner, off the job and out of the company, and everything went fine. Ultimately, we went, that went to court, and I had to testify what I knew about it, and we learned subsequently that that the person, the former partner, had been diverting funds from the project and building a new house for himself. So, so things do happen, and thankfully, the major partner came in and made everything right, because otherwise it could have just turned into a horrible disaster.
Yeah.
But there were a whole lot of sleepless nights for me as I went through that.
Well, there's always challenges on projects. And I always say that, collaboration or teamwork is not going to overcome mental illness or people who are willing to lie, cheat, and steal. It just isn't going to. It never is.
That is true. And I learned, that that it's always important to get those lien releases with the payment requests every month, so that you, at least have some coverage there.
That's funny. So what's the very best advice that you have ever gotten?
I'd say the best advice that I got was from the father of a close, longtime friend of mine, and I had been asked to advocate on my friend's behalf, and his father told me, he says, you really shouldn't put your nose in someone's business unless you know all sides of the story. And so only later did I learn the rest of the story and found out that the solution that they had planned was really the best solution for all. And it taught me to be very skeptical of what I hear from everyone.
That's cute. That's funny. Well, it's true. There's always two sides, right? My mother told me that too.
Oh, there's usually more than two sides.
Well, in construction, there's usually 20 or 30 or 40 sides, all of which are right from their own perspective.
Mhm.
And so you've got
Yes.
to understand all the perspectives. So we ask everyone to give us a gift, a resource. It could be a book or something, a link, podcast that you have found to be very, very helpful and that you would like to share with Construction Nation.
I actually have two resources that I'd like to share. One is the Project Delivery Practice Guide. It's the second edition, and it's published by the Construction and Specifications Institute. And it's available through CSI and through Amazon. And it outlines and describes every phase that of the construction process and of the buildings from conception until through the life cycle, the end of the life of the building. So it includes a lot of graphics that are very descriptive, that describe difficult concepts. It's a reference that I often refer to when I'm reviewing process or responsibilities. And then when I'm having to deal with attorneys, writing agreements and writing general conditions and things like that, it's something that I can give to them and, to explain what the process is that we use within the construction industry, what the industry standards are.
So we will put a link to that in your show notes for this episode.
And then the second resource is the Leadership Freak blog. And I'll send you the information for that. They're on Facebook and they've got a couple of websites, but they're daily, very short thoughts and essays about leadership, plus comments from those that read these things. And it just discusses traits about good leaders. It also gives you advice about how to become a good and respected leader. Or if you're working for a person that isn't a good leader or someone who you don't or can't respect, it provides strategies for coping with those people, until one of you moves on to a different position.
That sounds great. So we'll put that in also as a link in the show notes for this episode. So how can Construction Nation get a hold of you if they wanted to chat with you more or explore what or hire you for some architectural projects?
Well, I can be reached through LinkedIn. There are a total, I think there are 3 Stuart Seidens on LinkedIn. I'm the only one who's the architect. So,
and we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well. So what is your parting advice for us, Stuart? Something that we can maybe start doing today or tomorrow to improve how we select our teams or lead our teams?
My parting advice, it really comes from the Leadership Freak blog. And it's essentially is don't wait to feel humble to practice humility. So seek the best in others, avoid presenting a false or inflated appearance, work to understand and promote the goals of others, meaning the organization and the people you serve, explore how personal strengths, experience, and values might be useful to others. In other words, risk being more authentic.
Yeah. It's hard to not be yourself.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest, Stuart. It's been great to have you share some of your knowledge, information, and also to learn a little bit more about your selection process, because I had heard Stuart talk about it to others, saying that it really made a big difference. I wanted all of Construction Nation to hear about that. So remember, Construction Nation dream teams don't just happen. They don't grow on trees. They actually have to be built one step at a time. And remember that Construction Dream Team drops on Monday morning at 4 a.m. And please join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction so you can learn how to create your construction dream team. I look forward to seeing everyone then, and I will catch you then.